Welcome everybody. I will now explain the basics of the repository Chemotion that was built as open source instrument to open access data in chemistry. The repository is an infrastructure that can be used independent of any other software. Using the repository in that manner means that users have to upload and annotate data, as this is usual for many other repositories as well. It offers certain functions for chemists, as for example the analysis of data and the automatic check of some metadata and information. But the repository can also be used in combination with the Chemotion ELN, which then offers the benefit that data can be directly transferred from one system to the other system. That means from ELN to the repository directly. Data that's prepared in a very good manner in terms of description and metadata can be selected and provided in the repository with only little effort. Ideally, users of both systems manage the data in the ELN and prepare everything for a publication later on in the repository. So, if desired, as for example in parallel to the preparation of a journal publication, the users can select and transfer the data via only a few clicks. The process in the repository includes the choice of publishing options and authors, as well as the choice of a suitable license. And after submission of the data, then it's reviewed and published. The aim is here to offer a fast process to well-structured data, which is enabled by the ELN, where the scientists manage their data anyhow. ELN and repository are built and structured in a very similar way, but the repository covers only parts of the information that's available in the ELN at the moment. So this will be adapted in the development of the next years, hopefully, but at the moment only samples or molecules and reactions, including descriptions and calculations, for example, are covered with respect to the available main entities. Beyond that, the ELN offers other entities, so beyond molecules and reactions, there are well plates, screens, and the more flexible module research plans available. The screens and well plates are included for biological investigations. Research plan covers most of the other functions that can be described by more generic applications. In conclusion, so the repository supports the transfer of data associated with chemical functions and chemical work, but further disciplines are not yet covered, and that will hopefully come soon. This slide gives an overview of the structure and workflows that are implemented in the repository Chemotion. There are three main areas to be described for the repository structure, and that's first of all the preparation of data, then the publication process as most important part of the repository, and then in addition some external services that contribute to the functions of the repository. The preparation of the data can be done in the workspace of the repository, and data can enter the workspace in two ways, as said before. The first way is the upload of data directly via the user interface of the repository, and the other option is the transfer of data from an ELN. After the preparation, so editing of the data and the submission, the DOI is reserved and data is reviewed by several assigned reviewers. The submissions can be rejected, they can be accepted, or review can be requested by the reviewers. Thus, a full reviewing cycle, as for example known from other journals, is supported. Depending on whether an embargo was set, then the submission is either set on hold or passes directly to the DOI minting via DataSite. After DOI registration, the data is released and results as a final entry enter the repository. In parallel, the information on the molecule is sent to PubChem and is registered there. So PubChem also delivers information on the novelty of the provided molecules, which is then added to the information on the final entry in the repository. This slide here gives an idea of how data, in that case a chemical reaction, and related data is presented in the repository. The landing page of a published reaction shows usually the given information of a chemical reaction and a description, including also details such as the reaction table, then including also all amounts of used reagents, then information on the identifiers that describe the reactions, as for example, the INCHI key and reaction INCHI key, and further information on the properties and details such as conditions for TLC control is given. The gain products of the reaction and their characterizations are then listed in addition below the reaction and its description. The characterization of such samples consists of one or many analyses that are given by an image file for quick view and information and details if desired. Each sample can be given with many analysis sections, as many as required, each consisting of different data sets and attachments. So that's the basic structure that's given in the repository. The analysis section always consists of different analysis types. This is, for example, protein NMR, carbon NMR, mass spec, or IR data. And each analysis type has different data sets. This is shown in here, so we've only one data set in that case, but in principle, different data sets can be added. And the data sets have different attachments. So this is what you see in here. Different attachments means, in that case, that different file formats of one measurement can be added. Such a collection of attachments is given on this slide, and it explains how the attachments are generated also from the original file. So here you see that a zip file was added and different files were generated from the zip file, amongst them this image, which is used for the preview, to have a quick view into the data and the information, but also other data files are generated amongst that an edited file that's created if the user uses the original file and selects peaks or uses integration techniques. Then an edited file is generated and stored in parallel to the original file formats. So now I will switch to a short live demonstration in the repository for the second part of this contribution. What you see here is the website of Chemotion repository, or chemotionrepository.net. And on the right-hand side, I summarized the items that are collected within the repository at the moment. That's mainly samples, reactions, and analysis. And these items are split into different categories. So we have published ones, some items under review, and under embargo, for example, as well. Here in the navigation bar, you see different parts of the repository. First of all, the database, so that's the workspace for the users of the repository. It's publications. Then publications is the page where we're summarizing all published elements after being edited in a workspace. And then we have a review area where data that's reviewed, so sent to the reviewers who are coming back, are listed, and then an area for embargoed publications. And I'm showing that at the moment with an account of a colleague, because she has a lot of entries there, and I might show some of the examples in review and under embargo with the examples from her account. I will start with the explanations from the part publications, because I think that's the clearest one. Here we see a collection of all the publications that were done latest. So this is structured according to the last published date. And here you see a lot of reactions that can be listed in another format also. So you can extend the samples that are shown and then just scroll through the results of this publication search. Here you see that there are different types of indications. Scrolling through the results of the published elements, you see here some symbols representing glassware, so an X vessel as we call that, and that's indicating that the digital entry in the repository has also an equivalent as the physical material. So we store the physical material, if desired, also in the compound platform, and that's available if the scientist is interested to use the compound for other tests or biological applications or something like that. So every time you see a symbol like that in this entry, then you know if you're interested in compound, in the target compound that's given here in this entry, then you may ask us for having that compound and using the compound in your studies. Besides giving the reactions in a list format, one can have access to the samples. Also, in a very similar format, you see that samples as products of a reaction are listed separately. We separate reactions from samples because samples can be added also without a reaction, as some characterization data might occur even without reaction because it's just isolated or gained via another resource. Then it's possible to enter that and give the characterization of the data also without the assignment to a reaction. And there's also a last category, that's scheme-only reactions. I showed it just in brief. Scheme-only reactions was entered to allow people to submit reactions, so the scheme of the reactions even without any data confirming this reaction. The aim in that case was to have a database of reactions that were published in the past and could not be gained with analytical data because, for example, the analytical data is not available or the reactions are too old, so the publication was done a long time before, and this then is a database of reactions without analytical data. The list format is just one representation mode. If the user search for certain reaction types or certain molecule types, then that can be done via this search function. And I guess the most prominent way to search for structures is the structure search. And here I give one example for coumarines. And you just select one of these examples given as a structure search, and then all coumarine compounds available via the repository are listed, and one may just scroll through and select some of the items to have a deeper look. I will now select one of these examples to show you what kind of details are delivered with the reaction. And that's first of all the publish date, the license that's given, but also the information on the contributors and the authors. So the contributor is always the one who submitted the example or the reaction, and the author is the one who did the synthesis in that case and the characterization of the data. The DOI that's generated is listed here, and also the metadata generated. Metadata that was submitted to dataset are also there to be downloaded as an XML file. So if one is interested in having a look at the details in the metadata, then that can be opened via XML. The ID of the repository here is the Chemotion repository reaction ID. We offer several IDs, the CRR, as said, Chemotion repository reaction ID, but also the Chemotion repository sample ID and the Chemotion repository dataset ID. So in addition, CRD and CRS are available and can be referred to then in journals and other places to indicate the repository entries. First of all, what we see in here is the reaction scheme, so probably the most important part for a chemical reaction, and its details. so the reaction temperature, for example, and the yield that was obtained, also including the reaction table, as was demonstrated also in the first part of the description of the repository. The description, of course, is included, also a description of the purification techniques and other details that I mentioned before. And here, below the main description of the reaction and its conditions, we see the target compound and the characterization of the target compound. So this is the most important part as outcome of the reaction for us, and therefore is directly listed below the reaction. Reactions with 2 or more products then result in generation of 2 or 3 or as many as necessary product samples in the end, and all of them are listed below the reaction. Here you see that the products are given with certain information on the product as well. Again, the UI generation metadata file that can be downloaded, and here the already indicated number as a CRS number, and for the data sets generated the CRD number. We list here the result of the characterization with the analysis data. For example, the protein NMR analysis, carbon NMR analysis, IR, for example, mass analysis, and everything's given with the text result, but also with an image file and the direct link to the analytical data. That's something that I will show later on. So this is a direct link to the data in a workspace, which I will show later on and show some details how that works there. The quick view in the data is something like that. So this is an image that's generated automatically and available directly via this list entry and summary. So as you see here, mass spectra, I added also high resolution mass spectra as given as well for that example. The requirement for the generation of such an entry in the repository is that at least one analytical file is available that can be used to approve the existence of the product. So this is the difference to the scheme-only reactions. If you submit something as full reaction, then the reaction dataset should be as complete as possible, but at least one dataset has to be given, for example, protein NMR, if the structure is already known, to approve that the product that's indicated is gained. There's one special feature of the repository which is a bit hidden, so not that prominent in that case. This is this function here. So that can be used if you have any comments about the reaction. If you see any mistakes, then you can contact the team of Chemotion and then give your indication or whatever you think about the reaction and possible problems, and then we just review that, and if that's true, we will give that then in addition as an information to the reaction that further users may see those problems that might occur. Here on the landing page of the repository is a very special button because it gives us the direct link to the workspace of the repository. These buttons are placed at other positions in the repository. Also, here you see this blinking button for the sample, gives you direct access to the workspace area, and this action is also the same as if you go to the MyDB. This gives you also the direct access to the workspace area. I just show that for one example in the list. If we go through, you find these blinking buttons for each landing page. Going there means the redirection to this reaction we searched for, and the link to the workspace now allows us certain functions that are not available via the landing page. So first of all, we see the full information. Here you see that this is what the landing page offers us as well, but in principle you may search then for other information if there's solvents added or further condition added, and you may have the same access or the same view as given also in the ELN. So in principle, that's a general issue. The whole repository workspace looks very similar to the ELN because it's more or less the same software basis, and the workspace then offers functions such as editing of data, organizing data, and editing data for the publication process. So everything's done within the workspace area, and therefore workspace area has special additional functions. One of the most important functions, I guess, is the access to the data directly, so the access to the analysis that's added to the reactions or the samples, and the direct access to the data in the data viewer can be gained via this symbol here. Here's an example for protein, carbon, NMR, mass spectra, and IR spectra, and if you go to this button here, that enables the view via the spectra viewer, allowing you to search for details within the dataset directly, for example, zooming into the data and then looking for additional signals, impurities, to do the integration from scratch or things like that. So if you want to get rid of additional signals indicated in here, then you can do that. What you may see is there is no function enabled except predict. So there are certain functions supported to allow the prediction of molecules that are given, but there's no save function or others. That means as a simple user of the repository, you are not allowed to change anything after the publication process, and as this selected sample is already published, there's no way to edit the data or to do a versioning, at least via this process at the moment. So you can analyze the data, view the data in detail, but a change or a constant editing is not enabled. We can have a look at other data, like carbon NMR data. Sometimes it happens that the users have only an automatic processing of the data, and for example, the threshold is not corrected. So this is something, if this is misleading and makes the analysis of the data difficult, then you may change that via the workspace of the repository. Mass spectra can be seen as well, can be opened as well, and of course not only having a look at the data is supported, but if you see the data files attached to that, you can download them directly via these buttons and get the data to work with them also in other software tools, or to compare the data with own data. So everything that's assigned or that's correlated to download of data, editing of data, analysis of data, that's supported in a far better way via the workspace of the repository. The workspace area of the repository offers the user also direct access to the reviewing comments. So the comments of the reviews after the submission of the data, and this is given here in the list on the left-hand side of the repository, and here you see, for example, in red, the reviewing requests from reviewers. Clicking on that, you see a summary in list form of those entries that have to be edited or where comments of the reviewers are available, and if you choose one of them, you then directly see the entry with the data that you gave, and going to this button here, the communication toolbox, the reviewers' comments are directly visible. So that left-hand side was the original page that you had in the workspace area of the repository, and on the right-hand side of the page that we see right now is the landing page that was submitted, or that was created after submission. And scrolling down, you see the comments of the reviewers, like, for example, in that case here, the workup was forgotten, and then the author changed that, added that, and then is agreed on. So there's a communication loop for reviewers and the authors, and this is available via this communication toolbox. And after going through this cycle of changing and requesting some changes from the reviewer side, then the data is published. So everything moderated via the workspace area of the repository. I'll now close this part in the workspace area of the repository, and I will then return to this main part of the repository, describing just in brief how the review pages look like. What you see in here is something that's available via the workspace area as well. It's just a shorter summary of what's going on in the reviewing process, and here you see all the submissions that are at the moment pending, so submissions that were sent to the reviewers and are waiting for answer. You may filter that here according to accepted, reviewed, and pending. So this is quite comfortable for the users, and they have a direct view and the data they submitted, and that's waiting for answers from the reviewers. In addition to that, I mentioned also Embargoed Publication. That's an overview of the data that already passed the reviewers cycle and was accepted, and this is organized according to embargo bundles. Means that data belonging together perhaps due to an assignment to the same planned publication is published under the same embargo bundle number, and as soon as the embargo bundle is complete, means that all the data belonging to this embargo bundle is reviewed and passed this workflow, then the embargo can be released. So this is the area of the repository where embargoes are released and the user decides that the data is complete and plausible and there are no errors in it, so it can be published, and this is then done by the action of the user. Coming now to the end of the demonstration of the repository Chemotion, I showed several parts of the repository, in particular the workspace area with some of the functions there, in particular the reviewing part. What I didn't show is the submission process within the repository, so coming from data that's transferred or uploaded then to the real submission and the selection or choices that have to be made then in the repository. But this is probably something that we can show then in the next session of the Stammtisch. So I hope you enjoyed it a bit, and if you like, please feel free to enter data into the repository and ask us if there are questions. So we highly appreciate if there are other users of the data or other people who are interested to contribute to the repository's database or the submission of their data. Thanks a lot for your attention.